Pain is a messenger, not a punishment. Most people are taught to see pain as an enemy, something to numb, avoid, or medicate away as fast as possible. But there is a radically different way to see it. Pain is not attacking you, it is trying to reach you. Every ache, every heartbreak, every sleepless night carries a message from the deepest part of your psyche, a part that has been ignored for too long. When something in your life is off balance, a relationship, a career, a belief you've outgrown, pain is the nervous system's way of screaming what your conscious mind refuses to admit. Shocking as it sounds, the people who suffer the most breakdowns are often the ones closest to a breakthrough, because the psyche will keep turning up the volume of pain until it is finally heard. This means chronic anxiety, repeated failures, or a recurring emotional wound are not random cruelty. They are patterns demanding translation. The tragedy is that most people fight the messenger instead of reading the message, so the same pain returns in a new costume again and again until it is faced. Once you stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this trying to show me?" pain stops being a life sentence and becomes a language you can finally speak. The shadow you bury becomes the pain you carry. Inside, every human being lives a hidden self, the traits, desires, and truths we were shamed into rejecting as children. We push them into darkness to be accepted, to be loved, to survive. But nothing pushed into darkness disappears. It waits. This buried self is what quietly manufactures anxiety, self-sabotage, and the sense that something is wrong even when life looks fine on the outside. The shocking truth is that the very things you refuse to look at in yourself are often running your life from behind the curtain. Your anger, your jealousy, your fear of being ordinary. Pain, in this sense, is the pressure of your own rejected self trying to be let back in. People spend fortunes and years running from feelings that were never meant to be defeated, only met. The moment you turn and face what you've been avoiding, without flinching, without shame, its grip begins to loosen. This is why so many people feel worse the harder they try to think positive while ignoring what's underneath. You cannot outrun a shadow, you can only turn around and claim it as yours. Suffering is the doorway to becoming whole. There is a deep and uncomfortable idea buried in the human story. A person cannot become complete without first being broken open. Comfort keeps you the same. Crisis is what forces growth. Every mythology, every ancient initiation ritual, every hero's journey begins with the same shocking pattern. The old self must die, often painfully, before a stronger one can be born. This is not poetic exaggeration, it is psychological fact. The version of you that has never lost anything, never failed publicly, never been humbled, is often the most fragile and the least awake. Wholeness is not the absence of darkness, it is the integration of it. A person who has faced despair and survived carries a depth, a steadiness, and a compassion that comfort alone could never manufacture. This is why the most searching, wise, and grounded people you meet are rarely the ones who had it easy. Pain strips away illusion. It burns off the fake self that was built to impress others and reveals the real one underneath, the one capable of surviving anything. Becoming whole is not a gentle process. It is closer to being remade in fire, and that fire is suffering itself. What you resist doesn't disappear, it multiplies. Here is a truth that should unsettle you. The harder you fight against a painful emotion, the stronger it becomes. Avoidance is not protection, it is fuel. Every addiction, every distraction, every way we numb ourselves is really just resistance wearing a disguise, and resistance always backfires. The feeling you refuse to sit with today will return tomorrow, next month, or in 10 years, often disguised as a health issue, a failed relationship, or a breakdown that seems to come out of nowhere. Nothing comes out of nowhere. It comes from everywhere you refuse to look. This is the paradox that shocks people the most. Surrender, not fighting, is the actual path to freedom. Sitting with an emotion you hate, grief, humiliation, rage, without trying to escape it is one of the bravest acts a human being can perform, and it is also the fastest way to dissolve that emotion's power over you. The world teaches conquest and control. Real transformation asks for the opposite: presence, patience, and the willingness to feel the very thing you've spent years avoiding. What you make peace with loses its grip. What you resist owns you, meaning turns suffering into transformation. Two people can experience the exact same tragedy, loss, betrayal, failure, and walk away as completely different human beings. One is destroyed by it for the rest of their life. the other becomes stronger, wiser, and more alive than before. The difference is not the event. The difference is the meaning each person assigns to it. Suffering without meaning festers into bitterness, but suffering that is understood, questioned, and integrated becomes the very fuel of transformation. This is a shocking responsibility to accept because it means you cannot simply wait for pain to pass. You must actively work to understand what it is teaching you, or it will teach you nothing and simply repeat. Every crisis carries a hidden invitation to ask deeper questions about who you are, what you value, and what you have been avoiding. People who transform their pain into purpose are not luckier than those who don't. They simply refuse to let the suffering be wasted. They mind it for insight instead of burying it in distraction. This is the difference between a wound that scars you and a wound that changes you forever for the better. The deepest wound often becomes the greatest gift. There is an old and unsettling pattern found across healers, artists, leaders, and visionaries throughout history. The very wound that almost destroyed them became the source of their greatest gift to others. The person who survived abandonment becomes the one who can hold space for anyone else's loneliness. The person who battled their own darkness becomes the one who can guide others out of theirs. This is not a coincidence. It is how transformation actually works. Your deepest pain, once faced and understood, becomes a form of authority no comfortable life could ever grant you. This is shocking because it means the parts of your story you are most ashamed of, the chapters you want to hide, are often exactly where your greatest value to the world is hidden. Nobody is inspired by someone who has never struggled. People are moved by those who fell into the abyss and climbed back out carrying something for others. Your wound is not proof that you are broken. It may be proof that you are being prepared. The goal is never to erase the pain from your story. It is to let it finish its work so it can become the very thing that helps someone else survive theirs. What if the very thing you've been running from your entire life is the only thing that was ever meant to save you? What if every sleepless night, every heartbreak, every moment you thought would break you completely was never punishment, it was preparation? We are taught to fear pain, to medicate it, to bury it, to pretend it isn't there. But what if pain has a voice, and it has been trying to speak to you for years? What if the breakdown you're terrified of is actually the doorway to the person you were always meant to become? By the end of the next few minutes, you will never look at your suffering the same way again. Because what if the wound isn't the end of your story? What if it's the beginning? What if everything you have ever been taught about pain is wrong? What if the suffering you have spent your whole life trying to escape was never your enemy, but the one thing trying to save you? We live in a world obsessed with comfort. We reach for distraction the second discomfort appears. We medicate sadness. We scroll past grief. We smile through exhaustion. We call it staying positive. But underneath all of that avoidance, something ancient and honest keeps knocking, and it will not stop knocking until it is finally let in. Pain is not cruelty. Pain is communication. It is the deepest, oldest part of you trying to tell the loudest, most conscious part of you that something is deeply out of alignment. A relationship that has quietly become a cage. A career built to impress people you don't even respect. A version of yourself constructed so carefully to be accepted that the real you underneath has been buried for years. Pain is the sound of that buried self banging on the walls, demanding to be remembered. And here is the part that should shake you. The parts of yourself you have rejected the hardest, your anger, your jealousy, your fear, your shame, do not disappear because you refuse to look at them. They wait in the dark. They grow heavier in silence. And they run your life from behind a curtain you never open, showing up as anxiety you can't explain, patterns you keep repeating, a hollow feeling even when everything looks fine on paper. What you don't face, you carry. What you carry eventually breaks you, not because it is too strong, but because you were never meant to hold it alone in silence forever. This is why comfort alone can never make a person whole. Every story worth telling, every soul worth admiring, was forged the same way, through fire, not through ease. The person who has never been humbled, never lost anything, never faced their own darkness, is often the most fragile person in the room because they have never been tested. Wholeness is not the absence of pain. It is what happens when you finally stop running from it and let it show you who you really are underneath the performance. And here is the paradox nobody warns you about. The harder you fight a painful feeling, the stronger it becomes. Every addiction, every excuse, every distraction is resistance wearing a disguise, and resistance always backfires. The grief you refuse to feel does not vanish. It waits for you in a hospital bed, in a failed marriage, in a body that finally gives out from carrying what the heart refused to release. But the moment you stop fighting and simply sit with the pain, without escaping, without numbing, without pretending, its grip begins to loosen. Surrender is not weakness. Surrender is the bravest act a human being can perform. Two people can suffer the exact same tragedy and walk away completely different, one destroyed forever, the other transformed. The difference is never the wound itself. The difference is the meaning they gave it. Suffering without meaning turns into bitterness that poisons everything it touches, but suffering that is questioned, understood, and faced honestly becomes fuel. It becomes the exact reason some people rise from ashes stronger than anyone who never burned at all. And this is the deepest truth hiding underneath all of it. The wound you are most ashamed of, the chapter of your life you want to erase, may be exactly where your greatest gift to this world is buried. The person who survived abandonment becomes the one who can finally understand someone else's loneliness. The person who battled their own darkness becomes the one who can walk someone else out of theirs. Nobody is inspired by a life that was never tested. People are moved by those who fell all the way down and still found a way to carry something back up with them for others. So what if the pain you are so desperate to escape right now is not the end of your story? What if it is the exact material your transformation is being built from? What if you stopped asking why this is happening to you and instead asked what it is trying to make of you? Pain was never sent to destroy you. It was sent to wake you up. Every wound you have survived, every night you thought would break you, every version of yourself you have grieved and let go of, none of it was wasted. It was the fire that is slowly forging the person you were always meant to become. The breakdown is not the opposite of the breakthrough. It is the beginning of it. Do not run from what hurts you. Sit with it, listen to it, let it finish its work, because on the other side of that fire is a version of you strong enough, wise enough, and whole enough to help someone else survive their own.